For our next speaker, I'm really excited about this. Martha Pollack is the 14th president of Cornell University and professor of computer science, information science, and linguistics. She took office on April 17th, 2017. President Pollack has embraced the One Cornell vision and strongly believes that a Cornell education must foster the joy of discovery, set students on a path for lifelong learning, and teach them to seek the truth, assess evidence, and determine the reliability of information. Pollack was previously the provost and executive vice president for academic affairs at the University of Michigan. It is my pleasure to welcome to the stage President Pollack.
Thank you, Scott, and good morning, everyone. It's really my pleasure to take part in my first Entrepreneurship at Cornell Summit and to welcome all of you. Across all of Cornell's campuses, entrepreneurship is thriving. Cornell Tech, I hope many of you have had the opportunity to visit the campus. Generating startups there is a key focus, and it just opened its new campus on Roosevelt Island in September. Up in Ithaca, students are using the eHub co-working space day and night. And students from all the colleges and schools on campus are involved in the university's entrepreneurship ecosystem, whose many activities are supported by entrepreneurship at Cornell. Each year since 1984, the university has presented our Entrepreneur of the Year award to an outstanding Cornellian who demonstrates not only remarkable business achievement, but also community service and high ethical standards. It's my honor to introduce this year's recipient, whose entrepreneurship and philanthropy are equally extraordinary. Robert F. Smith, class of 1985, founded Vista Equity Partners 17 years ago, and in that time it has grown to manage $30 billion in capital. Vista oversees a global portfolio of 50 software companies that employ more than 45,000 people. As chairman and CEO, Mr. Smith guides Vista's focus on enterprise software, data, and technology-enabled solutions. Just last month, he was named by Forbes as one of the 100 greatest living business minds. He studied chemical engineering at Cornell, where he designed his own co-op program, and he went on to earn an MBA from Columbia Business School before working at Kraft General Foods and then at Goldman Sachs in tech investment banking. There he played a key role in mergers and acquisitions involving such major companies as Apple, Microsoft, and Texas Instruments. Mr. Smith has shown a deep commitment to using his resources to benefit others. Last year, he personally, and through the Fund 2 Foundation, of which he is the founding director and president, gave $50 million to Cornell to fund chemical and biomedical engineering, to support African American and female students throughout the College of Engineering, and to create a fellowship program at Cornell Tech. Cornell named the Robert Frederick Smith School of Chemical and Biomolecular Engineering in recognition of his generosity. Mr. Smith's philanthropy extends far beyond Cornell and includes the largest personal gift of $20 million to the new National Museum of African American History and Culture at the Smithsonian. His public-spirited service includes chairing the boards of Carnegie Hall and Robert F. Kennedy Human Rights, as well as serving on the boards of the Boys and Girls Clubs of San Francisco and the Bay Area Discovery Museum. Just this May, he signed the Giving Pledge, which commits to giving back the majority of one's wealth. At Cornell, Mr. Smith has served on the Engineering Advisory Board, and I am delighted to say that he recently joined the Cornell Tech Board of Overseers, where his expertise will be extremely helpful. Mr. Smith, your leadership and thoughtful, socially responsible philanthropy mean a great deal to me personally, to the world, and to Cornell. As one of the university's most distinguished alumni, you set an outstanding example for our students by demonstrating the extraordinary impact that Cornellians can have across the nation and around the world. So on behalf of the entire Cornell community, it is my great pleasure and my great honor to honor you, Robert Smith, as the 2017 Cornell Entrepreneur of the Year.
So we're going to have another fireside chat, this time with our Entrepreneur of the Year. Lance Collins is going to come on up. So some of you know this, but the Entrepreneurship at Cornell program is governed by 12 deans, so the dean of every school and college at Cornell, which does indeed make us very unique. The structure works out very, very well. This current couple year cycle, Lance Collins, the dean of engineering, is the chair of the governing board, so I spend a lot of time with Lance, which has been absolutely a pleasure, and I don't say that just because you're here. It truly has been wonderful. So Lance is going to have a chat with Robert, and we will learn some more insights. Thank you.
Great, thank you.
Thanks, Zach. It's a pleasure to be here. Congratulations, so well deserved.
Well, thank you so much, and President Pollock, thank you for those wonderful words, and I want to thank the Cornell community and all these wonderful people in the audience to take time out of their day to hear us chat. But again, Cornell was such a wonderful experience in a formative time in my life, and the School of Engineering was just, frankly, one of the elements that helped me actually think about solving problems in a very elegant way. So again, I'm deeply appreciative of all that Cornell has given me, and hopefully I can give just a fraction of that back in some form or fashion.
Well, I appreciate it, and I concur with your sentiment. So hey, let's get into it.
So we're not even yet? No.
So it was interesting hearing about the path that you've taken to becoming an entrepreneur, and just in terms of the Kraft General Foods, moving on to getting an MBA, and then some time at Goldman and so forth. And in many people's minds, the standard pathway is through Silicon Valley, which is quite a bit different. And I'm just wondering how you view your path in sort of vis-a-vis the more, what many people think is the way to becoming an entrepreneur.
Sure. It's interesting. I remember when I was applying to colleges, and I went to visit Cornell, and Cornell had a wonderful program, and I hope they still, again, we've talked about it, it's called the Minority Introduction to Engineering. I got a chance to visit the summer of my junior year in high school and spent a couple of weeks and really got to meet, really was TAs, professors, but really understand a little bit more about what was happening at Cornell, and it was a wonderful experience. And as many of you Cornellians may or may not know, summer is the best time to be in school at Cornell. And actually, when I designed the co-op program, it was because, I kind of don't like these winters in Ithaca, and I can go to school in the summer. It was spectacular. We used to tease, they turned the synchrotron on and kept the clouds away, and it was just beautiful. But I remember when I was applying to schools, and I got into a bunch of schools, and one of them was the school, Stanford. I was put on the wait list. My mom said, well, you're going to go visit? I said, Mom, there can't be any more beautiful place than Cornell. I was there this summer. It was spectacular. And then
And it's like that the whole year.
10 years later, I finally got out to the West Coast and went to Silicon Valley, and I'm like, oh my God, what was I thinking? But I have to tell you, and I will tell you this, I will choose a Cornell engineer over any engineering student that I found. I have the great choice. No, in all honesty, I mean, there is something about that experience. It's not just that Cornell believes in rigor, okay? And there's a lot of programs out there that aren't as rigorous as our engineering program. In engineering schools, while tough generally, we bring a different degree of rigor. And beyond what I call the ability to solve complex problems, Cornell engineers have grit, okay? They actually come out with a tenacity and a doggedness that is enviable, frankly, in the engineering community. And so,
I'm just going to interrupt. I think those hard winners are part of that grit.
Yeah, there's no doubt.
We're not running
don't
around
do them every year. I mean, if you can take a semester and go to Stanford for a semester, do it. But to a great extent, I think that created a basis that helped me understand the importance of sticking with problems and seeing them through. And so while a number of people, start school and go become an entrepreneur quickly, I think finishing there, working in industry for 6 years really helped me. The world I live in is actually a confluence of two worlds, and it just so happened that they work pretty well together today. One is technology, and the other is finance. And when I ultimately made a transition, went off to business school, and I'll tell you about that in a second, where I learned how much these people made in investment banking was obscene. I'm a hardworking engineer. I was making $42,000 a year. I didn't think you made any more money than that in the world. And then some of my friends were telling me about what these investment bankers made. They're making hundreds of thousands. I was like, you gotta be kidding me. I know these people. There's no way they can be worth this. And I said, what is it that you do? Because you're clearly not solving any world problems, right?
No, they're creating them.
Yeah. And, in all honesty, and from that, when I looked at it, so I started interviewing these investment banks and all that sort of stuff. And I said, and I literally, as an engineer, I literally had over 100 interviews because I was collecting data, right? I had no idea sales, trading, research. What do you people do? And and the only business I liked was mergers and acquisitions. Okay, because I said, because with the exception of warfare, it's how assets get transferred across this planet. Warfare and divorce, but that's how assets get transferred across this planet. And that was interesting to me.
Yeah.
And if you think about it now, the confluence of technology and the confluence of finance and M&A all kind of happened. And I was sitting here in New York at Goldman Sachs and sitting with my boss, Matt Keller at the time, and we were in Gene Sykes on the West Coast. He said, we ought to start a tech group. And I said, that's probably a good idea. And I said, but if I'm you guys, I'm actually thinking you may get an engineer to start this tech group because we don't have any other engineers in our department but me. And so I got drafted. They said, that's a good idea. You want to go out to California? I said, oh, no, I would never do that unless you really convinced me to do it. So I was our first M&A banker on the ground in San Francisco, focused on technology. And I got the chance to work with this little company that had some problems with the CEO and the board. We got rid of the CEO and kicked out the board and got this guy, Steve Jobs, to rejoin this company. It's called Apple. All right. Worked on a spinoff of Agilent Technologies from Hewlett-Packard, worked with a little company called Yahoo, a little company called eBay, and realized that the short answer is no one was doing buyouts in enterprise software. Now, getting back to my Cornell days and my tech days, as a chemical engineer, which we all know the smartest engineers out there, but as a chemical engineer, one of the things we focused on was really process controls, right? And we weren't really developing any new unit operations. It was process controls. And I remember one of my first experiences where I was basically programming a TDC 3000 PLC, and it created 26% productivity in the plant. And I was like, software is and continues to be the most productive tool introduced in our business economy in the last 50 years, and likely will be for the next 50. But no one was doing buyouts, in enterprise software. So that's where the idea came from, and said, if you actually created a standardized process for not only doing the buyouts, but for creating value in these enterprise software companies, you could actually do okay. And that's the whole construct of what Vista actually is today.
Well, that's incredible, because it touches on a question I have been in my mind for a while. So I'm also a chemical engineer by training.
Brilliant. See, I told you all. And you were head of the School of Engineering.
Yes, I am.
So recognize.
Yeah. There we go. Yeah, I'm totally with you. On the other hand, I don't remember the course that came, in that chemical engineering suite that told me how to become a private equity investor.
Yeah.
I must have missed that. Well,
you missed the Wall Street experience, right? So again, part of that ultimately is, we are a little bit of a sum of the substances of our experiences.
But sorry. Just trace it back. So, you said a little bit of process.
Right.
Because you have attributed your success to chemical engineering on
question.
many occasions.
Yeah.
And if you could, for the audience, just to kind of give.
I didn't do that to the development department of Cornell, but just, the rest of the
No, in all seriousness, because I'd love to understand how, what you draw upon.
Right.
From that, way back then. To help you today.
Yeah, so President Pollock and I were talking about this in the back room. So the thing about engineering is, as many of you probably know, and chemical engineering in some respects, what we think about are repeatable processes. You know, we get messy things to deal with as engineers. You know, someone comes and we've got a mess and we need to create some order to this mess. And most people look at this big mess and kind of throw their hands up and say, let's go get an engineer, right, to sort this thing out. What engineers are really good at is taking messes and putting into discrete components to drive a solution and then make sure it is sustainable. I call them an engineered solution. So what we do, for instance, at Vista in our software companies is create engineered solutions. Rather than solving the problem just once, we want it solved forever through the process that we bring to managing whatever that might be, if it is a functional area in the business, if it's sales or marketing or development. So even the way we run our sales departments and work with our executives and enable them to run their sales departments more effectively, we create, for instance, a salesman factory. What does that mean? Well, we have a system for hiring people. Let me give you all an example. You know, if you think about this world, 7.6 billion people on the planet. There's only about 19 million of us who actually know how to write code. Okay, so now you got a problem. If you're really trying to digitize anything from Walmart on the one hand to beekeeping on the other, who's going to write this code, right? And every single industry on the planet is digitizing, every single one. They're trying to figure this out. But where do they get these people from? So now you've got to find smart people, and either they write code or they manage data, and they're pretty expensive, or you have to teach and train. So we have a system that has an aptitude test and a personality profile. So on average, every 3 years, we have 1.4 million people apply for jobs at our portfolio companies coming into our funnel. We test about 500,000 of them to hire 25,000. And I actually don't care if you know how to write a line of code. If you get an A on that aptitude test, we know we can teach you how to write code. And so we will hire you and then teach you how to write code. So we fill our system with a process, or we have a process to fill our system with talented people. And then we have a whole system for training. Rather than come out and get to work in 2 weeks, it's 6 months and 9 months of boot camp to teach you what our customers do, what our software does. And then if you're writing code, teach you how to write code the way we want you to write it, how to document it the way we want you to write it, and then put you in a group that actually creates some peer mentoring and learning. Again, it's a process orientation to developing a solution that is sustainable. So that's just one of the best practices that we use.
As you're speaking, it's making me think about unit operations.
Give me goosebumps, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Unit ops, I'm back in there. You got your distilling column, you got your reactor.
And then you have to retune, and then you have to constantly tune it, right? It's a feedback and feed forward loop constantly in terms of how do you now tune the answer to optimize the solution and maximize output. So that's private equity in a chemical engineer's lexicon, right?
So, tell us a little bit about Vista. I'm curious about, in particular, kind of conflicting things. I think you were the visionary, right? You put together something. You wanted to, in some sense, imprint that, what your concepts are. But you also have to remain flexible. Yeah. And that's that's always, I also have this same challenge. Right. How do you, on one hand, you don't want to let it go because, you're sort of wanting to get to something, bigger and better. Right. On the other hand, you need to be opportunistic. You need to be flexible. How do you manage? So
listen, for this audience, which I think are made up of entrepreneurs, it is important to have certain philosophies in managing your business. There's a couple that I use. I'm going to focus on one here. One is I call the principle of self-replication, right? Because you all will pretend that, I'm the best representative of every person in my company and they should act just like I would act. There's a problem with that, okay? Because you actually aren't the best person in that job because it evolves and all those sort of things. So you actually have to create what I call space and volume for people to fill with who they are. And this is the principle that I call, you need to create a platform where people can become their best selves. Okay, and becoming your best self is not only understanding why we are doing what we're doing, but you have to have room for them to contribute their capabilities into your ecosystem and into that ecosystem where it can now evolve into a better solution for the collective. And then you have to have mechanisms by which that naturally occurs. For instance, I have these things called BPSS's, best practice sharing summits. Every month, somewhere on the planet, our top 300, 400 executives by function are getting together, okay, for 2 or 3 days. And it might be sales, marketing, G&A, whatever it might be. And in those 2 or 3 days, of 50 portfolio companies, there'll be, 400 people in sales, regional sales reps, national sales rep, et cetera. And they're going to teach and train each other on these best practices over 2.5 and 3 days. And so those who are doing the teaching, of course, now have the ability to what I call express the refinements and express how they've actually implemented some of these best practices and how they've been effective. Those in the audience who've just joined the portfolio, we've just bought the company, okay, now have a chance to participate and see and learn, and hopefully becomes aspirational, because it usually does. They say, man, in a year or 2 or 3 years, I want to be the one up there teaching my colleagues. And then you create a peer mentoring network. It's very different. Entrepreneurs, as you probably know, as if you're executives, it's a lonely environment. It's a lonely world. Who do you talk to, right? Well, if you think about it and you're in a company of 200 employees or 500 running sales and services, well, who is your peer group? Who do you talk to about some question that you have where there's not a conflict? So I like to think that we kind of
like being dean.
Yeah, it's a lonely job, right? Well, you can go talk to your president. She's lovely and wonderful and smart and helpful, but she's going to conflict you out if you don't do something the way she wants to do it. But that's an interesting thing, right? And so for you entrepreneurs in this audience, I would also recommend YPO, Young Presidents Organization, if you could join that. And then the more important part of YPO, people tell you the networking and all that, that's nice, but the important part of it is actually your forum. Okay, and forum is where you pick 6 or 8 people, or they pick you. They have to be in a business that's non-conflicting. And then you will always say, I don't have time for this. And you'll find out that's the best time you spent that month, because you can actually now talk about ideas. People need to have some peer-to-peer network and mentoring. And, engineering school gives you that in some respects at that level. And that's an important part of the refinement, ultimately, as an entrepreneur and an executive, is to create a peer network to engage with. So those are the things I think that are important as entrepreneurs to focus on.
If I relate it back to me, and my comment about the deans is that actually the deans get together, right? And they have forums, in a similar way. Since we have an audience of entrepreneurs, I was wondering if you might say a word or two about what you consider to be the traits that lead to success as an entrepreneur.
Yeah,
advice to this group.
Yeah, probably if you're in a software or data or technology enabled business, the most important thing you can do is first come see Vista before you do anything else.
Okay.
So, any questions? Yeah, so there's some picking up on a little bit of that. I like to tell people that being an entrepreneur, it is a lonely job if you make it lonely, but you've got to call it those penalty-free environments. So that's kind of point number one. You have got to enable a culture where the evolution and the development of your people is central to that culture, not what I call the dictatorial pathways on which the way they should do things. So that would be point number 2. Create a platform for people to become their best selves. So that's how I characterize that. I think it's critically important to always be aware of the competitive dynamic in your market, but not aware of it just in a point of fear, but in a point of education. You should make sure you are continuing to inform yourself as to where your market is going. And don't be so egotistical to know that you think that you know everything, but to be open yourself to getting informed on where your market's going. So when I'm looking at companies or we're looking to buy businesses and the management team's quote unquote coming along with it, as opposed to a spin out of a carve out and there's no management team, or it might be an orphaned asset or what it might be, we're looking for those things. We're looking for those intellectually curious executives who can take feedback, who can take information and relate it into their markets and be an expert in that market and say, this is how this is going to translate, because our business is constantly changing. 5 years ago, we weren't talking about AI and ML. And today, AI and ML is a part of every one of our strategic plans for all 50 companies. Okay? 8 years ago, we were talking about cybersecurity to make sure it was a part of the plan. 7 and 6 years ago. So our business has to constantly evolve. Today, we're talking about how do we bring, the web of I'm called a blockchain fabric across our portfolio companies. And guess what? On the future, we're looking, okay, how does quantum computing change all of this, right? So we have got to, if you don't have an environment and a culture and a company culture that can accept and welcome refinements and accept and welcome, changes in either platform or delivery or market, then you've got a company that is destined to die a quick death. So as entrepreneurs and as leaders of entrepreneurial organizations, you have to keep that in the forefront of your mind and design your culture that way. And that's the hardest thing to teach. But when you get it right, it will last for decades. And that's an important part of that dynamic.
I'm curious in a slightly different aspect of the same question about just the whole issue of risk and the degree to which is it something where an entrepreneur is someone who accepts a higher level of risk than the average person? Or is it really the kind of thing where you're describing where you're constantly analyzing to kind of, in some sense de-risk the directions you're thinking about?
Yeah, so I'll put it in two camps. So when I first started Vista, I had I'll call it a wonderful investor, limited partner who saw the wisdom of this wonderful idea, but created what I call draconian terms to manage risk, to make sure that we were not going to lose money. Okay, and if we were, it was kind of coming out of my hide and all that sort. Literally, so it was like I tell my team, we've now done 294 buyout transactions and have never lost money on a buyout ever in 17 and a half, almost 18 years.
Wow.
Okay.
Wow.
There's no private equity fund on the planet of this size who can actually state that. Part of that is the design, the industrial design of Vista, which I explained a little bit about, that process orientation, that industrial design of Vista. And like I said, I taught my team not to lose money elegantly at all, right? So and that's culture, okay? And so in some cases, you got to manage, okay, that downside risk to the detriment of potentially capturing all the upside, okay? And as entrepreneurs, you have to think about that. That's a natural dynamic. But depending upon how you're capitalized, you may have other degrees of freedom a little bit later. And for many of you, because of this democratization of computing power, okay, point number one, the rate of change in your industries is far more accelerated than it was, call it 8 or 9 or 10 years ago. So you're going to have to think about risk very differently than probably when you started your company, because someone can come and disintermediate you, in a moment. I can guarantee you a year ago, there wasn't a CEO supermarket on the planet thinking Bezos was coming in the supermarket business. And he just changed everything because he had a platform, okay? So, and I can guarantee you 3 weeks ago, there wasn't a pharmaceutical companies on the planet thinking that they were going to move into the pharmaceutical business, right? So you've got to think about it in that context, because if someone has developed a platform, a software platform, it is easy to migrate into different industries and disrupt those industries if you don't have those competitive advantages or sustainable advantages in that context. And that's where the risk comes in. Do I build out the next level of AI into my business processes so I can offer a next level solution 2 years from now, or do I save that money today and do something else? Okay, because if somebody's out there developing that on your platform, on that platform, guess what? 2 years from now, you may not have a business to defend. So it's a constant battle. So that's why you have to be open to accepting risk, but you have to also be very open to what are the solutions that you can bring in to mitigate and manage that risk. So those are the dynamics that you're constantly wrestling with.
You mentioned, this.
I want to see what kind of pictures he's drawn over there. That's pretty good. We should, if you had an argument with your wife, you could actually
map out a solution.
Yeah, well, at least say, this is what you said. It's right here. Anyway, I need to talk to you, man. We gotta. Anyway.
So you're talking about how technology is, evolving, and I wonder, because you're in this enterprise software business that, how do you anticipate where things are going? Your point at the very end when you said something could come along that's just disruptive, and
yeah.
You could lose a whole.
There's no question. Again, principles of self-replication and that kind. You got to replicate your paranoia, right? and across the whole portfolio. We have. I want to say tremendous insights from each one of our portfolio company as to what's happening in each of their markets, right? Through constant updating, and then you have to be thoughtful and anticipate. Well, if they do this, you've got to play this game of chess constantly in that context. And then you have to say, how do I bring forward strategic mechanisms that cause dramatic change across a portfolio? Say AI, ML. I will guarantee you, we're the only private equity firm in the world who has a strategic AI, ML, solution that we're driving across our entire portfolio. 50,000 employees are going to be educated in AI, ML over the next 12, 18 months, right? Because the democratization of that is going to, I think, enable each one of those employees to contribute in levels that is going to be, unseen or unfelt for any other private equity firm out there, right?
Now this is the Vista University.
That's one of the delivery mechanisms.
We're having to keep a sharp eye on.
Well, please do. Please do. And like I said, we'll lease some intellectual property to you from time to time.
Thank you.
Yeah, we were teasing because I think we are 3 times bigger than Cornell now. But anyway. I didn't mean to say that out loud twice.
You did. I think you might have said it out loud.
Yeah, okay.
I could be wrong. Did you guys hear any of that?
Yeah, but that democratization is an important part of how you, because if it's all siloed, again, for you entrepreneurs, if all your intelligence is siloed in the top 3, 5, 8 people in your company, I will guarantee you're not collecting what's out there. Okay, you've got to make sure you have empowered people in your organization to bring back information, feedback as to what competitors are doing on the one hand and what you should be doing because customers need this on the other, right? Customers are out there demanding sets of solutions that don't exist. And if you have an existing customer, that is a wonderful asset, okay, that you now have to think about how you mine it to develop some products for them or for their ecosystem. The way we like to think about it, we're not just serving our customers, we have to serve our customers' customers. Enable our customers to be a part of an ecosystem as opposed to let me just sell you some software that helps you and helps me, right? So that's a dynamic of a mindset that's important to inculcate in culture and deliver in a repeatable fashion across a broad scale organization.
Yeah. That's very interesting.
See, that's an engineering thing again.
Yeah, there we go. Hey, I'm going to switch topics a little bit. As was also mentioned in the introduction, you've become one of the world-leading philanthropists, and of course, incredibly generous gift. Very grateful to it, to Cornell, to also the African American Museum and in other places. But it's also brought you out of the shadows in some sense. Like you've become quite visible. Say a little bit about, kind of what drives you as far as that's concerned, kind of where you see it going.
Sure. So there's a whole bunch of factors that you have to think about. One of them is what I call really at its highest macroeconomic level, look, half the world's population is going to be on the other side of the planet by 2025. So that's kind of point number one, right? Point number two, if we don't take advantage of all of our citizenry here in America, I tell people we're going to be downloading software, not uploading it, okay? So we have to enable every citizen to have an opportunity to participate in what is this fourth industrial revolution. So the way I think about it is we have to create all of these on-ramps. And the good news is technology enables these on-ramps to happen much more quickly. There are software platforms out there, cloud-based computing, and the capabilities of enabling more people to participate, in this economic shift that's occurring. I think we had Jet.com executive speaking earlier. Every single industry on the planet is digitizing. And the massive disruptive effects of it, we only feel some of it here in America. We kind of say, oh, Amazon, and okay, and there's 2 or 3 or 5, and Uber, and all of that. Let me tell you, in other parts of the planet, it is completely disruptive. There's a company in Indonesia, okay, that I was visiting with a couple weeks ago, that started off as a transaction processing business, labeled as a bank. They democratized what I'll call software programming. So they didn't go hire a bunch of new software programmers and engineers. They actually trained their people, okay? and didn't hire one additional person, as people required, okay? This company in the last 8 years went from a $400 million market cap to a $35 billion market cap. That's the same size as Credit Suisse and a little bigger than Deutsche Bank in Indonesia, okay? 90% of their transactions are done online or mobile. And they've only got 15% penetration in their home market. Now, if they ever start to export those platforms, that platform can be 2 and 3 times the size of some of the banks you all are using today. So technology and technology development is absolutely changing everything. So to a great extent, the way I think about it is we have to enable our citizenry to participate in this transformation. Because if we don't, I will guarantee you, because the massive population that's on the other side of the planet and the fact that they are becoming more technical enabled, not burdened with what are some of the legacy systems that we have had in some respects, their innovative cycles are going to be faster, okay? And their capabilities to capture markets is going to be accelerated. It's basic economics, and it's basic as we think about it. So I want to ensure that our citizenry have that opportunity. So that's what one of the areas that I focus on.
So how do we do that? So, you know, your comment about wanting to activate the entire citizenry.
Yeah.
You know, so what are your thoughts about that?
It's different levels. I mean, so at the one level, you know, I focus and on a thing called Empower. Empower basically takes high school graduates, returning veterans, and teaches them to become IT services reps, right? In 9 months, you can start off and go from making $8 and $9 to $10 an hour to making $35,000, $40,000 a year as an IT services rep. So that's not everyone's going to be, you know, AI ML programmer, but not everyone has to, sweep the streets for a living. You see what I mean?
Yeah.
So it is creating those on-ramps, and we put these in what I called embargoed communities. The first one that we opened as part of the program was in Baltimore, okay, a block away from where Freddie Gray was killed. The second one we put in St. Louis, within a mile of where Michael Brown was killed, okay? All those, because that citizenry is actually feeling disenfranchised. So where do I go? How do I lift? We've now had over, I think, 120 graduates out of just those 2 programs in the last year and a half. Okay, and now our programs are going from 30 to 60 to 90 people and graduating everyone in classes. That is one level. Okay, then the next level, of course, is the things we're doing, at Cornell and what we're doing with the UNCF, and how do we drive these STEM-based programs into communities that haven't had access? Because if we don't take advantage of the brain power that we have in this country, it's going to be a tough slog for our kids and our kids' kids.
And I have always found that as you call it, brain power is just distributed to all people. So if we exclude any particular
Lance,
group.
great point. So remember this aptitude test I was telling you?
Yeah.
We get the same distribution in every community that we test.
Oh, that's great.
8.8% of the population in that community gets an A, 14% get a B, period. I don't care where on the planet you are, that's what you get. Okay, so we hire from that 25+% plus or minus. That's what we're going after. Now, if you just take that basic math and you look at the population, okay, on the other side of the planet, they have more people who get A's than we have people. Okay? It's actually not that complicated. It's basic math, right?
Yeah.
Even art students can do that, right? I'm teasing. I love art students. We're just doing an engineering thing up here. I should have said even electrical engineers can do it. That's what I should have said. That would have been better. I'll work on that one. But I think, again, that's an important dynamic that you just have to understand. And look, at a point in time when there was scarcity in computing power, then you didn't have to worry about it because people don't have that. Well, not anymore.
Yeah.
I was with an executive in India, and he is building out and putting $30 billion and is building out 4G broadband network throughout India and is connecting, listen to this number, 1.9 million schools. 1.9 million schools. Okay, we own a company that we touch about, half the U.S. K through 12 population. We have 8,000 school districts. When our company's Power School, we get to, 75,000 schools. 1.9 million schools. Now, you enable those kids and do the distribution. Okay, 8.8% get A's, another 14% get B. Guess what's going to happen in the next generation? People who are saying, I want to change my station in life, and I know the best way to do that is to write software and to build code and to actually develop a product that has some meaningful impact on either my community or the economics of my community, it changes everything. And the economics change, dramatically across this planet. So it is an imperative that we focus on this issue.
Yeah, absolutely. So, just I'm curious about your thoughts in terms of, again, I'm thinking about our audience here. When you started your company, I guess it was 17, 18 years ago, I wonder, what do you think about today? So for the young people who are thinking about starting companies today, is it harder, easier?
There's no greater time, I think, to be an entrepreneur, at least in the world of enterprise software. Or, I laugh a little bit with a little bit of fear in that laugh. And I'll tell you why.
The paranoia.
It is because 10 years ago, 8 years ago, everybody wanted to be Mark Zuckerberg, right? And I was fine with that. Everybody's going after the consumer. I'm like, great, all those big brains and smart minds going after those consumer businesses. Everybody left enterprise alone, right? Well, now everybody wants to be Mark Benioff, right? It's like, how do I serve the businesses? And how do I serve businesses? Just like, if you think about it, the bee example, okay, that's not a consumer business, that's business to business.
Yeah.
How do I enable these beekeepers, okay, to be more effective in the job that they do? We need to talk about the pricing. I don't know who will come see me about that.
She's right over there.
Yeah, we're going to talk about that. My wife bought me a bee farm last Christmas. I don't have 3,000, I've got like 4, but we should talk about the pricing models. We make great honey, though. It's called, what's it called? Honey for My Honey. That's the brand she got. Malibu Farms. It's awesome. Anyway, we'll talk. But if you start thinking about that whole dynamic business to business, and you start to identify, the economic rent savings, $300,000 per, I don't know how many hives it was, but $300,000 savings per hive by minimizing the yield ratio. That is across every single industry.
Yeah.
Okay, because software is massively productive. We do a study, every once in a while. We did the last one about 4 months ago across 48 of our software, actually 35 of our software companies. The average ROI of the products we sell to our customers, this is our products to our customers, 707% ROI, payback less than 5 months. Think about it. I know we got pricing problems too. That's why we need to talk, because we just raised the price 4 times. I feel good. But if you are in the real estate business and you decide to actually make a building energy efficient, double pane windows and LED lighting and it's a 45% ROI. 707. 45% ROI. If you implement, the old process controls, right? Six Sigma in a process industries plant, 200% ROI, 700%. You see the point?
Yep.
And all you smart people from McKinsey, you tell us that your reports give you 300% ROI, and I believe you, kind of. But that's the impact.
Yeah.
So what's actually, occurring is we actually have the ability to analyze what the savings is. Okay, for enterprise software in a way that you can now go sit with customers and say, oh, by the way, not only can I deliver the savings and more user-friendly and all those sort of things, but I can distribute it in a cloud architecture, and so you actually don't have to have a whole lot of initial cost.
Right.
The key to that is just don't compete with any Vista companies, and you'll do just fine. But I think it is easier to be an entrepreneur today because of the distributed computing power and capabilities that are out there. The hard part is people and talent. That's the hard part.
So just any final thoughts? I think we're just about out of time.
Always hire a Cornell Kimmy as your first, second, third, fourth, and fifth employee. Listen, this is a wonderful time to be an entrepreneur. I think you're going to see over the next 10, 15 years, again, a dramatic shift in what are the companies of the future. Half of the Fortune 500 companies since 2000 no longer exist. Okay, it's a staggering statistic. Okay, and there's a massive amount of capital that has now actually flowed into the VC market and the private equity market. I think the last count was $963 billion in private equity of dry powder today. Okay. And if you think about it, there's been half the number since 1996 of publicly listed companies that are now still publicly listed. So If you think about it, it's the private markets that are fueling this growth. And those private markets have never been more open. They've never been more receptive to entrepreneurs and to people and companies who are changing the way business is done. So, like all things, I know you and I wish we were 25 again to start this over. We got to go with what we got now. But, you know, if you are actually starting a business now, it is a wonderful time, I think, to embrace all the opportunity that's happening because of the dislocation, disruption, and the availability of tools.
Yeah.
You know, back in our day, you used to have to sign up to get computing power and a half hour at a time. You all get it anytime you want, day or night.
So it's a great time. I really want to ask the audience to thank Robert for a fantastic.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
You're adjourned.
Thank you. Pleasure.